Hurricane Lee, a very large Hurricane Lee. When you see it on the satellite loops, you'll know, and you can see it here on the image that I've already up. Hurricane and tropical storm watches are up for much of New England. We're going to be talking about that, and of course the impacts, because there are going to be some impacts for areas further south for Long Island and coastal Connecticut and Rhode Island, and even down along the New Jersey shore and down to Delaware as the ocean continues to get ripped up. We'll talk about the weekend, the long range, and get in depth on Lee tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Mulch, topsoil, sand, salt this coming winter. And of course, if you need to kind of buff up your house a little bit to make sure it's protected in case there's a tropical storm or hurricane, get in touch with Omni, 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Be fun to have one up during a storm like this, enjoying the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And take a look at their website because they have a lot of other weather gadgets and gizmos and even smart weather fashion. So if you do decide to make a purchase, use the coupon code I want a weather station, because if you do, you'll get
10% off, which is nothing to sneeze at.
What was that?
Sneeze.
It was? Was that a real sneeze or you faked it?
I will take the fifth on that.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to a late starting Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is usually on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35. Because Joe had a talk to do tonight, we pushed it to 8:30. So glad everybody was able to make the adjustment. I see the regulars are on the chat board. Welcome to you, and welcome to those of you who are new to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Alan is new, a gentleman here on the chat board that's from Massachusetts, so we're glad to see the New England folks on. And for those of you lurking into the background, subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn your notifications on so that you don't miss a Joe and Joe Weather Show. And I have a feeling we're probably going to be on Friday and Saturday, but Joe and I will talk about this, and we'll let you know for sure tomorrow. In the meantime, if you like the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight, hit the like button. We like to get over 100 likes. Makes us feel good. So if you do, hit like. Okay, so this thing is big. On the satellite loop, Joe, it's really, from north to south. I mean, if you want to count the northern extent and the southern extent of all the clouds, it must be at least 500 miles across. And I've got the loop up on the screen here so that everybody can see. And it still has a fairly well-defined eye. Now, the question, of course, is what's going to happen? When is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? And I think we're still tossing a few balls in the air as far as that is concerned. But eastern New England, and I think particularly Maine, is probably going to get the worst of it. Also probably the western parts of Nova Scotia. And Joe, you might know more about this, but I saw a post today on Twitter, now known as X. The Bay of Fundy has one of the highest tidal rises from low to high tide than just about any place on Earth. Now, you put the track of a tropical storm in there, if it goes right in the Bay of Fundy, I can only imagine what the outcome might be if it comes at high tide.
Absolutely. Well, you're right. The tidal range from low tide to high tide could be as much as 20 or 30 or even 40 feet, believe it or not. In fact, Renata and I went to Nova Scotia back in 1989 BC, before children.
Right.
And there was actually a gentleman who, on a daily basis, allows people to come on his property to watch the bore so to speak. In other words, the flow of water as we approach high tide comes. It kind of like flows right past you, and so he gives like a little, you know, discussion as to what you're expected to see. You're looking at things and say, "So, well, what are we? There's nothing. I don't see all that much in anything." And he's like keeps looking at his wristwatch, and all of a sudden, there's this flow of water, and it's kind of like a channel, if you will, leading out of or into the Bay of Fundy. I'm not exactly sure. It's been so many years ago, but it's kind of amazing. And the fact is also, and you probably find this online, pictures of, let's say, boats and ships in the Bay of Fundy area that are literally like down, you know, touching the surface of the water, or the sea, the bottom of the water, and seeing, you know, 6 or 8 hours later, you know, way up, because of the fact that the tides run so very high. Probably the greatest range of tides anywhere on the surface of the earth. And you're absolutely right. This is the last thing that, and I don't know if anybody lives in the immediate vicinity of the Bay of Fundy, but this certainly is going to cause a lot of anxious moments, a lot of probably flooding conditions with the approach of Lee, especially so Friday and on into the start of the weekend on Saturday.
Not quite sure why my loops are running so slow tonight, but they are. So I apologize for that. I actually, they've got hurricane watches up for Maine. I can't remember the last time that even happened, but you know how confused I always get when it comes to when we talk about Maine as to what's south and what's north and eastern Maine.
Right.
All right. So one of my regulars on the on my subscription site, which I had the post up on the screen, and now it's decided to refresh itself. So I may have to look for it all over again, and I've got to wait for it to load too, which is a whole lot of fun. But the he wrote back to me today because I mentioned that I was having trouble about this, and he actually explained, pretty much what parts of Maine or what. So this is Justin King, who lives up in Maine, a big snow lover, by the way. He says, this is why we lump it all into weird regional terms. Now follow me on this, folks. The oceanside portion near Nova Scotia is down East Maine. Okay, I kind of figured that. Due north of that is northern Maine. So that would be 75 miles north of Bangor to about, roughly. And also, this is northern Maine. Say 75 miles north of Bangor, I'm guessing to about Caribou, because he left something out there. The coast, from 20 miles northeast of Portland to about 40 miles southwest of Bar Harbor, is the mid-coast. And everything south of there is the southern coast. Interior of the mid-coast is central Maine until about 3/4 of the way inland, and then it becomes western Maine somehow. The interior of the southern portion from about Lewiston to New Hampshire and north to Canada is also western Maine. He says it makes sense once you live here, but prior to that, it's pretty hard. Yeah, it is. I read this like 5 times, and I'm still not quite, still not quite there with where everything is. But we've got those hurricane watches are up for a good portion of coastal Maine, except maybe that area down closer to Portland, Maine, which is under a tropical storm watch. And then I've got tropical storm watches up for all of Massachusetts, back toward Rhode Island to Watch Hill, Rhode Island. And the Hurricane Center's also got storm surge watches. I noticed that they actually mentioned for Long Island Sound and back into Flushing Bay, surge of 1 to 3 feet, depending on the timing of that surge relative to the time of high tide. So it's kind of tricky here. There's a lot of ifs involved as to whether there's going to be some tidal flooding as far southwest as, say, southern New England and Long Island.
Well, regardless of whether or not there is a tropical cyclone involved, as I mentioned this before, that whenever you get into an astronomically high tide period, and this is what we're moving into right now, new moon is tomorrow night. And you won't be able to see it because it's in the same line as the sun, but there is that moon that's in alignment, what we call a syzygy, sun, moon, and earth. And during those times, the water level is going to be higher than it usually is, as opposed to any other time of the month. So even, as I said, I told this story before when Bernard and I were going to Lamaze classes when we were expecting our first child, our son. It was in Freeport, Long Island. And the woman who was holding the classes, like in the middle of the class, she said, "How many of you out there are parked here and down that way? If you are, I would suggest you move your car." And sure enough, there was that big, beautiful full moon hanging up in the sky. And we saw literally the water coming slowly but surely, lapping up from the coast and up the street. So, and if you lived there, you knew that you had to deal with this on a regular basis. So now you've got a tropical cyclone, you've got a hurricane, for goodness sake, into the mix here. So I can only imagine what people who have that problem are going to be dealing with over the next few days. Thanks to Lee, it's going to be tough.
Well, I got the loop moving a bit better, so that's good. And again, really has expanded. The gales go out 200, well over 200 miles to the northeast and southeast of the center. I think they had 250 on the advisory. And the 64 knot winds go also quite a distance from the center. I think it was something like 75 miles in the northeast and southeast. That's pretty far along. But these storms, so they get to this latitude, especially this time of year, they start gaining latitude. They start spreading out a bit. They're not quite as tight as what they were at lower latitudes. But the satellite signature still looks fairly impressive for a storm that's just below Category 3.
And in fact, you may remember yesterday, Joe, I was talking about the impact in the immediate New York City area. And I was saying places that are located further to the east would likely have cloud-filled skies to deal with for at least the start of the weekend on Saturday. Well, guess what? And you could see it right there on your screen. This thing is so big now, so huge, that the back or the peripheral effects, the western side of the storm, is likely to spread cloud cover. I think on Friday, we're going to see right from the get-go on Friday, high clouds beginning to increase, lower, thicken by the afternoon on Friday. And not just Long Island, but probably the entire tri-state metropolitan area. In fact, these clouds may extend all the way back into eastern Pennsylvania, for God's sake.
No, wouldn't be a shocker.
It does not look like it's going to be a.
It might not be a solid overcast though. A lot of what's the periphery stuff is all a lot of high cirrus. It may not be, but on the other hand, you get a little bit of ocean flow in there. There might be some some sort of middle cloud deck that develops and comes in westward as well. So yeah,
right.
I could see it.
And I could see also on Friday, again, and I'm talking about the Hudson Valley. I do a Hudson Valley forecast on Facebook every day. So I'm talking about for the Hudson Valley on Friday. I said by the afternoon on Friday, freshening winds out of the north at upwards to 25 miles an hour or more in gusts. And on Saturday, I could see winds gusting past 30. I wouldn't even be surprised if even in the Hudson Valley, we had some gusts approaching 40. I mean, as you just said, the circulation expanding in the coming next few days. It's already very, very large. So what's stopping it from giving a strong and gusty day on both Friday and Saturday?
No, I totally agree with you. And the loop also shows, by the way, we've got this cold front that has moved through now, through the northeast and extends all the way down into the southeast. And there's an upper trough with a little upper low. If I can get this thing to draw, which it doesn't want to do tonight. Oh, this is wonderful. I guess because we're starting at 8:30, even The computer is objecting to that. But you got this upper trough that's swinging eastward. And of course, that is good news for the mid Atlantic coast and up into southern New England because if the frontal boundary were stalled back in western New York, in central PA, down in the mountains of Virginia and North Carolina, the alleyway for this to track would be much further to the west. But with the frontal boundary moving offshore, and actually the northern part of this is going to slow down, so Lee is going to just kind of rock right along that frontal boundary, and still looks to me like it's moving north-northwest, but as we go through tomorrow, it's going to start turning more northerly. So at least we better turn more northerly because you certainly don't want to get this to 70 west because that would be problematic for areas to the south and west of where the hurricane center is indicating. We don't expect that to happen. We don't expect any problems here, though. This thing has been really behaving very well when it's come to the actual forecast and how the models have been handling this. The spread has been very, very tight across most of the models. And yeah, we've had that jumping back and forth with the GFS jumping from a couple of runs and the European jumping and the Icon model jumping. But today they've all seemed to kind of coalesce on the idea that this is going to pass east of Cape Cod by at least 100 miles. The spreading out of the storm and the area of gales and the area of 64 knot winds, we always we use the maximum sustained wind in the advisory. I think this is one of those instances where we maybe want to shy away from putting too much emphasis on what the strongest winds are and focus more on the fact that you're going to have this large radius of 64 knot winds. You might not have 100 knot winds, but you know what? If you've got 60 or 70 mile an hour winds sustained going on for hours on end, or what it will seem like hours on end, that's almost as problematic as one big blow through of 100 miles an hour.
Absolutely. Now I did on Facebook my own measurement here. I said that the center of the storm, the center of Lee, probably sometime before daybreak on Saturday morning, passing about 330 miles, statute miles, due east of New York City. And interestingly, Joe, there's a website where if you know the latitude and longitude of one spot, point A, and the latitude and longitude of point B, this
it'll tell you all the McDonald's that are along that stretch.
This will give you in nautical miles, statute miles, and kilometers, the distance between point A and point B. So I use that, with the National Hurricane Center map this afternoon, and came up with about 330 miles. So that's about as close as it's going to come Saturday morning. But again, because of the fact that it's so huge, so wide, the effects in terms of wind and in terms of cloud cover probably is going to easily overrun much of the tri-state area from Friday on into at least the start of the weekend. And then the assumption is, at least my assumption would be, that by Sunday, by then the storm will have already crossed through New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada, and moving away on a northeast trajectory rapidly, that hopefully by then we'll see the clouds open up or break up. We'll get more in the way of sunshine, and also the winds will calm down a bit. By the way, on Friday and Saturday, there's a fair chance that some of you, not all of you, but some of you may have a tough time cracking 70 for a high temperature.
Oh, I agree, especially the further east you go. I think that's going to definitely be the case.
Right. We're presumably taking down the pool this weekend. I think the pool season is pretty well over. Although I might point out that maybe about the early to middle part of next week, the temperatures may make a nice comeback, and in parts of the Hudson Valley, we may be looking at temperatures back in the mid to upper 70s. But heck with it, and then it's like late September. It's time to move on. Time to get ready for a new season.
Well, we've got the Hurricane Center's forecast from the 5 o'clock advisory up on the screen. And you can see in the pink and the yellow is where we have the hurricane in pink and the tropical storm watches in yellow. And so far, nothing. I mean, at least on the advisory, I think usually they mention if there's warnings up for parts of Canada, but apparently, at least for Nova Scotia right now, they don't have anything yet. So here's just to run through this. And one thing I love about the advisory is there's always at least a place as a point in the where the watch starts or finishes that I've never heard of. And so I get to learn about a new place. So today's new place is Stonington, Maine, Joe. Stonington, Maine. The hurricane watch is from Stonington, Maine, which looks like it's about halfway up the coast to the U.S.-Canada border. Tropical storm warnings are up for Bermuda. We don't want to forget Bermuda because even though the hurricane is going to pass a fair distance to the west of Bermuda, it's going to be in that area of big gales because the gales go out 250 miles. Tropical storm watch is in effect from Watch Hill, Rhode Island to Stonington, Maine, and that includes Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket. A storm surge watch is in effect for Cape Cod Bay and also for Nantucket. So just laying out where all the watches, and then they mentioned that interests in Canada, need to pay attention. So I guess the Environmental Canada hasn't put up any kind of watches yet. Maybe they'll probably do it tomorrow morning, is my guess. And you can see, by the way, after 2 p.m. Saturday, it becomes post-tropical, and they've got it emerging into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And then if you just draw a straight line, it looks like it goes through, western Newfoundland as a post-tropical storm of some kind. Although, looking at the models, it really doesn't look all that strong by the time it gets up there. It doesn't look like there's a lot of what we call baroclinic effects or non-tropical intensification, or at least maintaining its strength. But you never know. There's still time with that. And as we said, with regards to the hurricane tracking models, there's one outlier here that sort of exaggerates a bit the left hook at 72 hours, where it's not that far to the southeast of Cape Cod, and then it goes north and northeast again and joins the rest of them with a landfall just to the east of the Maine-Canada border in down east Maine. There, I got it. And the vast majority of the tracks from there take it either over the Bay of Fundy or over western Nova Scotia, then turn it to the northeast and carry it across Newfoundland, and then, kind of makes the right turn and then goes out to the east. The storm model, the intensity models, right now it's a Category 2, and you notice that it's basically a downward drift. At 72 hours, we have actually more of the models showing it below Category 1 strength than above it. And I think a lot of that's going to depend on what happens as it goes over this colder water that it is now, getting ready to pass through. And then by 96 hours, just all of them have it underneath tropical storm strength. And I have that graphic here that we've been showing the last couple of days. So Lee is all this water off the southeast coast of the United States, away from the Gulf Stream, has been upwelled by Franklin and by Idalia, and the water temperatures in the sort of that lightish brown or faded yellow color that extends from off the North Carolina coast all the way to Bermuda and actually to the east of Bermuda. That's water temperatures that are at about 26 C or roughly 78, 79. And usually the water temperatures there, when it's not upwelled this time of year, are at least in the lower 80s. And ocean water temperatures that are around or under 80 degrees is really not supportive for a major hurricane. And that's part of the reason why you see this being weakened down to a Category 1. And then they kind of hold it as a Category 1 until it gets into the Gulf of Maine and then, makes that turn. So we've got the forecast track in the middle, and you've got the quote unquote cone of uncertainty that exists for where the center is. But again, the size of this hurricane, with respect to the extent of gales and the area of rain, it's probably it's wise not to focus on the center here, because we're going to have hurricane force winds probably out at least 75 miles away from the center, and gales out 200 to 250 miles away from the center.
And just to get back to something I was talking about maybe about 10 minutes ago, about how Bernard and I, when we went to Nova Scotia, we were talking about this gentleman who opened up his property to whoever, from sometimes all parts of the world, to show a demonstration of what he called a tidal bore. I'm looking here on one website, and it says that for most of the rivers in and around the Bay of Fundy have a tidal bore, a wave front of the incoming tide that bores its way up a river against its normal flow. And one of these, I think, was probably the ones of Bernard and I went. Notable ones include those on the Petitcodiac, Macon, St. Croix, and Kennecott rivers. and interestingly, you talk about water, of the potency of water, because of the tidal resonance in the funnel-shaped Bay of Fundy. The tides that flow through the channel are extremely powerful. In one 12-hour tidal cycle, about 100 billion tons of water flows in and out of the bay, which is twice as much as the combined tidal flow of all the rivers in the world over the same period. So that's an amazing place. And guess what, folks? This thing is going to thread the needle. I mean, I saw somebody on the board was talking about the last time Maine had a direct hit from a hurricane was Gerda in 1969. Well, you know what? If the track of the hurricane center is correct, this may actually just, as Maxwell Smart would say, missed it by that much. It may actually miss easternmost Maine or Eastport, Maine, but flow right into the Bay of Fundy. And oh God, I mean, I can't even imagine what that's going to do to the tides come this weekend when it comes flowing in there. And Joe, there's going to be, I guess, there's going to be a bit of a question for a short time anyway, whether the storm will make landfall or did make landfall in Maine, or whether or not it was New Brunswick, the adjacent province to Maine, or down east Maine. Kind of like the same kind of controversy that occurred for a while with Hurricane Bob. People, if you remember, were saying, well, did Bob hit Montauk, or did it stay just offshore? We may have a similar scenario here with Lee, unless Lee takes more of a left turn and does go into Maine come late Saturday or early Sunday.
The WPC folks, so with their rainfall amounts, the dark green is 2 to 4 inches, and the lighter green is 1 to 2 inches. And you'll notice that Rhode Island is out of that 1 or 2 inches. Southeastern Massachusetts, Eastern Massachusetts is in it, and the areas around the Cape are 2 to 4. No rain of the 1 inch. There's probably some lighter rain that goes back westward. I was thinking that maybe Eastern Connecticut and Eastern Long Island might get into a little bit of rain out of this, but I don't think it'll be any further west than that. Even though the clouds, as Joe you mentioned earlier, will probably get there. But this is not one of those types of storms that dumps many inches of rain. Because it is going to be moving along. In some respects, you can look at a fierce nor'easter and kind of put it into that category to a degree, but this will be probably on the high end, if not stronger, from when you want to make that sort of comparison.
Right, and the forward speed, that's another thing, is the fact that this thing is picking up in terms of velocity, in terms of speed. That's not good either. I mean, if you're near or along that track in down east Maine or New Brunswick or western Nova Scotia, certainly you have to take the rapid forward movement into account as well, and that's gonna play into making it more of a potent or more robust a wind field in your area.
And this is the digital forecast that was that was put out from the Weather Service, and this is for 8 a.m. And I brought up the wind gusts, and the blue areas over Cape Cod, they're showing wind gusts of 55 to 60. Montauk, this is at 8 a.m., so it's one time frame, folks. So it doesn't mean it can't be higher or lower. 34 for Montauk. Most of the wind gusts indicated over Long Island are in the mid to upper 20s. It's lower in the Hudson Valley and back over to New York City. But that could very well be underdone. I'm going to try to see what they come up with at midday. So they actually do have higher numbers, a little higher. Joe, they're going for 20s, 20-ish gusts in the Hudson Valley. But I agree with you. It certainly could be. It certainly could easily be 30 or 35, or maybe they might even be the odd gust of 40. I would say for eastern Long Island, there certainly could be gusts into the 40s there. And of course, just east of Montauk, you go to Block Island. We're talking 40 to 50, and then you move up the coast to Maine, and you start to see also some gusts. Now, again, this is going to depend a lot on how the center behaves. They're showing some 65 knot wind gusts halfway up the coast there, and I'll see if I can get another hour as the storm draws closer. They got a 73, just offshore. They've got 79 for a gust, and gusting 40 and 50 miles an hour up and down the Maine coast. This is for 5 p.m. Saturday, and still on the still gusting into the 30s over eastern Long Island and well into the 40s along the coast of Massachusetts and southeastern Massachusetts. And I'll just run it up to 8 o'clock. You see that center sort of getting closer. Now, just because you see this, this is the Weather Service, so the Canada side is, not populating anything because this is just for the U.S. But judging from the, if you look at the wind barbs, if you look at the wind barbs, I think it sort of suggests that it's just barely touching that, Eastport, Maine, just barely touching it.
If you live in Eastport, Maine, and you have all of a sudden one side of your roof is suddenly blown off or whatever, or the tree falls on your property or whatever, you really think it's going to be a big deal to you whether or not it makes landfall specifically at Eastport or maybe adjacent New Brunswick? I mean, it's
Yeah, I know. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. These are the rainfall forecast amounts, and I imagine these are probably going to be adjusted a little bit over the next day or so. But 3-inch plus amounts in the eastern half of Maine. Down the coast, it's up a couple of inches. Out on the Cape, it's about 2 to 3 inches. They do show, Joe, the Weather Service has got half an inch for Montauk, 0.20 for West Hampton Beach, 0.04 for Bridgeport, 0.04 for Kennedy, okay, 0.03 for Islip. So now some of that, I got to be careful here because some of that might be just left over from today. I don't think it is. This is probably a clean number here. So they're kind of covering for the possibility that maybe a little bit of rain backs westward, into central and western Long Island to about New York City. I don't think it's impossible that you get one renegade band. You know how sometimes these things, you get this renegade band that's on the edge that sort of migrates on its own to the west-northwest. I mean, we saw that here with the Dahlia because I'm about 300 miles from the Florida coast, maybe even a little bit more than that. And there was one renegade band that kind of broke away and just kept moving northward. We wound up getting about, I don't know, it was maybe a half an inch or an inch of rain out of it when it got up here. So it's not impossible that we could get a band that kind of pivots back westward.
No, it's a renegade band, or maybe just a spit or two. I mean, we're talking about hundredths of an inch. So we'll see. But I'm amazed because yesterday, I said, well, it appeared to me yesterday that the cloud line, a sharp cloud line, would be cutting right down through the Hudson River Valley, and places to the west would be out in the clear. And now this thing is at least from what I've seen this afternoon, the clouds may go all the way back into the eastern third of Pennsylvania. So,
Yep, we're in agreement. I'm going to bring up the radar while it's updating here a little bit. Leon Probitz.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you, Leon. Dude. You want to say thank you together?
Thank you, Leon, for hitting Super Chat tonight. Leon Probitsky hits the tip jar. Thank you, Leon. Most appreciated. 92 likes already, Joe. So we're only 8 shy of 100. So if we could get those 8 likes up there and get us over 100, Joe could get to ring his bell. Speaking of which, you got a pretty good downpour of rain this morning, did you not?
You know, if you go on the National Weather Service, the Upton site, and look at the latest rainfall totals, there's somebody, I guess he's a cooperative observer, in Putnam Valley. That is not me. That is not me. That person had indicated rainfall of 0.88, which, it's kind of strange because all around this area, places like Mahopac, for example, other areas too, generally anywhere from like 1 to 1.5 to 1.7 inches. But right where I am, my rain gauge recorded, and I tell you true, it was pouring to beat the band between 5 and 6 o'clock this morning, 2.06 inches of rain. I mean, it was coming down. Now, you say to yourself, well, how is it possible you got that much and somebody in the same town recorded like less than an inch? Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. We had first of all, we had thunder, we had lightning, we had everything. But last week, we had, if you remember, we had promoted this. The German American Club had their local Oktoberfest, and on Monday was Breakdown Day. It was the day when Renata and club members were at the club, taking things down in the aftermath of the fest. I was back up here, and I finally called her and said, "What are you people doing down there?" And keep in mind that the club, it was only like 3 miles, maybe at most, from where I am. And I'm saying to Renata, I said, "What are you people doing down there?" She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We've had like 3 downpours, 3 tremendous downpours." And she said, "Really? It hasn't rained a drop here." So that shows you. And I think also my son was mentioning that coming home from work, he drove onto his street, and all of a sudden it started pouring rain. But up until that point, there was hardly anything. So I'm just saying that some of these rain showers, and case in point this morning, we just happened to be right underneath, really, a very localized. I finally got to look at the radar. I got up in the middle of all of this at 5:30 in the morning and went online to look at the radar, and there was like this one small but very concentrated blob of red that was moving from south to north, almost directly over my house. And I said, "Well, there it is. That's what we're getting." And if you weren't underneath that blob of red, you were getting rain, and it was probably coming down at a pretty good clip. But we seemingly got the worst of it here, with again over 2 inches in less than 90 minutes time. It really came down hard. After that, the rest of the day we had maybe a spritz here or a shower here, but I mean the main batch of rain nailed us at between 5 and about 6:30 this morning.
Well, the radar is not showing a whole lot now, so that's good. And there's still some rain in eastern Massachusetts over the Boston area. Got a couple of flash flood warnings that popped up and then disappeared. Also up in Maine, seeing a concentration of some heavy downpours moving through the interior part of the state. We've got some showers and storms along the north and South Carolina coast. They seem to be winding down also in southern Georgia. There's some actually well to the east of me along. Yes, we did. He rang the bell. 100 yes. Likes. Thank you, folks. Most appreciated.
116, actually, Joe.
Yeah. The storms that are well to my east now looks like they're right along I-85 near the Georgia-South Carolina state line and getting ready to cross over. There's quite a bit of downpour activity in the southwest this evening, and we've got a few flash flood warnings that are up. A lot of small boxes too A lot of small areas of flash flood warnings in parts of Arizona, even a tiny severe thunderstorm warning that has popped up there. The Storm Prediction Center is indicating a well, they still have this marginal risk for Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and in eastern Massachusetts, except for what's on the radar. For everybody else, it's pretty much done. The marginal risk in the Carolinas to Georgia, that's mostly done with the except for the remaining pieces. And we've got a marginal risk in West Texas, southern half of New Mexico, and into southwest Arizona. No severe weather is forecast tomorrow, so I'll jump right to the Friday to Saturday time frame to see what they're doing. And they've got no thunderstorms in the forecast from Maine down to Georgia, which means I'm in a good spot here because got the dew points are dropping here, which is wonderful. And we've got a marginal risk in eastern New Mexico and into West Texas. I doubt that they're going to have anything in their long range, but I'll just go look again. Potential too low on day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7 predictability too low, and day 8 predictability is indicated to be too low. And WPC's rainfall amounts, again, you see the big concentration of heavy rain in Maine and coastal Massachusetts. Tapers off as you go west, gets rather sharply. The half-inch line touching eastern Long Island, and less than a tenth of an inch in the light green. Actually, the light green is 0.01 to 0.10, and that's running down western New England to western Long Island, off the New Jersey coast, and then back in somewhere in the southeast. Heavy rains in Florida over the next 7 days of, say, 1.5 inches to 3 inches plus. The same holds for central Texas, which is good, as after the heat wave where they didn't get much in the way of thunderstorm activity and rain over the summer. They're getting it now, and we've got 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch or so extending up through the Rockies, and a little bit of action up in the Pacific Northwest. So as far as the models are concerned, I've got the close-up GFS. Might as well get the 18Z and take a look at what that has to offer. I don't think it's going to show much in the way of change. One thing I noticed during these last number of days, Joe, the night runs want to go left, the day runs want to go right. That has been a fairly consistent theme for about 5 or 6 days now. So here's the in-between 18Z, and you kind of see that hook there that it goes northwest between 60. This is Saturday morning. The GFS has a 966 pressure, which would be a Cat 2. It's at 41.7 and 66.7. And the back edge of the rain. Now, I think the lighter green is probably rain that's not reaching the ground. Because remember, we're going to have dry air around with low dew points the next couple of days. So there's probably going to be a lot of dry air on the west side of this. So some of this on the west side may wind up drying up. The heavier band Saturday morning is just east of easternmost Long Island, gets into Rhode Island, Nantucket, Block Island, and then it just kind of shrinks away. The low center by Saturday afternoon is at 42.7 and 67.1. So it actually comes west from the 66 number. And then it goes northeast from there right into the Bay of Fundy. And moves on its merry way. So the GFS wants to take it right in between Eastport, Maine, and the west coast of Nova Scotia.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. We can look at the New European too and take a look at that. And these models have actually kind of coalesced. The European now all of a sudden is a little further east on the in-between run. But it gets the westernmost edge of the rain just touching Montauk. So it's a little bit further east with the rain shield. And we have, it's at 40, this is at 11 o'clock Saturday, it's at 41.5 and 66.9. And then it goes almost straight north from there. 43 and 66.8 at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see the heavy rains, back into eastern Maine. but they're starting to pull out of eastern Massachusetts. And, it kind of is just about getting ready to enter the Bay of Fundy at 81 hours, Joe, which is at 11 a.m. I'm sorry, 11 p.m. Saturday night.
Oh, well, it could be a fun Saturday night for folks who live on the western edge of Nova Scotia. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. All right, so let's let me go to the upper air so we can take a look at what's happening here. This is, of course, the driver. Where these things go. You always have to look upstairs to get some idea of what's happening. And here we have. If we just backtrack a little bit just to review, we've got this trough coming through the east. You see it here. This was this morning. An upper low there northeast of Lake Huron. It was enough to create a flow, enough of a trough that Lee is responding to by moving northward. That trough then goes out, and there's an upper low that's at Lake Winnipeg. That's going to drop eastward into the lakes, and that really is the one that takes it up further north and then eventually just turns it northeastward as the trough drops in from Lake Superior down into Tennessee. It's one of these upper air setups, Joe, that timing is everything. And if Lee were, couple of days slower, maybe the outcome would be the same because the next trough is fairly progressive and swings out to the east. But sometimes, you get these things where the upper air sets up perfectly, but the storm gets caught by another trough that's running out ahead of it, and as a result, you see a track like this one, or you see a track like Franklin or Idalia. Well, that trough's going to go out, and after that, it looks like we get a little bit of ridging again next Wednesday, which is September 20th, and we've got a bit of a ridge along the East Coast for a while, going into the latter part of September. So that's a bit of a change. The models were showing deep troughs in the east on and off for the next 2 weeks, and now they've kind of gone in a different direction as far as the long range is concerned. I haven't really paid too much attention to this. So, from the standpoint of the long range, so it's hard for me to comment on whether I agree with what it's doing or not. And this is what it looks like on the surface on the GFS. You see the frontal boundary is well out into the ocean tomorrow afternoon. You see where Lee is. It just responds to that weakness, moving straight north. Curls back toward the coast and then turns northeast and goes out. And we should be left with a fair amount of dry air. That's one thing with these hurricanes when they track like this. You actually get a lot of dry air that comes down behind it. And we're going to have some nice dew points here starting tomorrow and lasting, I think, into Sunday.
In fact, I did a check and determined that from tomorrow through next Wednesday, on average, give or take a degree or two, the dew point temperature here in the Hudson Valley, a tri-state area too, probably will be around 50, give or take a degree or two, which means that the humidity is going to be not even worth taking into consideration. It's going to be about as nice, at least from the humid standpoint. It's so humid this whole summer. It's so humid and so showery through the entire summer. I mean, Joe, I was mentioning to Renata, in the 21 years that we've been here in Putnam Valley, I don't remember a more humid and wetter summer than what we've just gone through. And I mean, literally everything around us. I mean, we live in a fairly rustic area, but I mean, it's like living almost in a jungle. Everything is just like
overgrown, sure.
Overgrown. It's and you try with the weed whacker, and you try going around with the tractor mower, and you try. It's useless. There's no way you can keep up with something like this. This is almost an impossible summer to keep up. And think about it. Last year, so much the opposite. Last year we were in almost like a drought with very dry conditions. This year we're seeing the flip side.
Yeah. And when you add them both together and divide it by 2, it comes out to average.
Yep.
And it seldom is average. By the way, just a general comment on the weather across the country. Just a couple of things. If you look on the upper right, Monday morning. Yeah, that is blue snow in Labrador. Okay, not a lot, but it's there. And then when you look to next week, Wednesday night and Thursday, yeah, that's blue, that's snow in the northern Rockies. So we're kind of moving in that general direction, albeit one day at a time. But there's not a whole lot weather-wise. A few places with showers and thunderstorms, which you would just normally expect anyway. But it's a fairly benign pattern for the remainder of the month, it seems. We don't see, this next system that's out in the tropics, which is the Hurricane Center, has a 90% chance of it becoming a depression or a tropical storm, and it probably will become a tropical storm. I'll just backtrack here because the first frame already shows it recurving. The models were doing some weird things yesterday with this next one. And there, if you look east of the Leeward Islands, you can see this is on Saturday. There's a tropical storm there, which becomes Hurricane Nigel, and this one is going to go west. According to the both the European and the GFS, Joe, this one actually goes east of Bermuda, recurves east of Bermuda for a switch, and then races out to the northeast of the open waters of the Atlantic. Finds its way eventually to Scotland. So, okay. But there you have it. So that's the only tropical system. Margot is just kind of sitting out there doing nothing, and then it's turning to the east and falls apart by the time it gets to Spain and Portugal. But Nate is going to follow that, and then it doesn't look like there's much else out there. It looks like tropical waves are there, but nothing that the models are picking up on and developing over time. So we're getting to the point now. You start to get to the end of September, beginning of October, you're going to see the development area shift westward, away from the tropical Atlantic, and more so, to the west of, say, 60 degrees west would be more common. Not to say there can't be something that'll form out in the tropical Atlantic, but I'm just quoting Climo here, and that's it. So we'll figure it out. We always tend to try to do that. We try to figure it out. Figuring it out is a good thing.
One thing I do know with absolute certainty and surety, Joe.
Yes, and that is?
We're going to be here tomorrow night at 7:35.
Yes, that we are. We are going to be here at 7:35. You know what? Because we did get a late start, and my body clock is off. I have a Briller Jeopardy, but we'll hold it for tomorrow. Shall we?
Surely.
And we'll let you know tomorrow if we're going to add shows for either Friday or Saturday, or maybe both days. But we'll let you know tomorrow what we're doing. Okay. So thanks everybody for being here. 132 likes. Thank you. Thanks Leon Probitsky for hitting Super Chat. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And anything you purchase from the Tempest website, use the coupon code I Want a Weather Station, because if you do, you will get
10% off.
Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125. Your go-to place to make sure your house, your garden looks good. And, of course, to make sure that you've got whatever you need to get through a tropical storm or hurricane. 631-756-1125 for the best prices in town. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. I realize I've been talking almost nonstop now for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, so it's a surprise you still have a voice.
Yes.
All right. We'll see everybody tomorrow at the usual time, 7:35. Nighty night.
Nighty night, folks.